most of you actually already work in public transport. You just don't realise it yet. I can probably guarantee that in the past week you've had a conversation about catching or missing the bus or train, getting stuck in traffic, wondering what happens to those buses on the real-time signs when they say they're due and then they disappear. See? You have public transport conversations almost weekly, if not daily. When I catch up with friends or I go out and meet people, they say, "Oh, what do you do?" "Oh, I work in transport in Auckland." Oh my goodness me. It's sometimes like saying you work for the IRD. And what you find is the instant response is, "Why don't you just?" Because everyone has an opinion on transport. As Josh said, we are constantly getting input from everyone because everyone has feelings about transport, whether it's frustration or passion. It's quite an emotive subject. I really like that aspect of working in public transport. It's the freedom. You do a whole variety of things and you get to mix with people from politicians to students to engineers to geographers. The whole mix is in there. I was one of those people at school who had absolutely no clue what I wanted to do. I went to Epsom Girls and all my friends were going to be doctors and lawyers and accountants, and most of them are. And I was like, oh my goodness me, what's wrong? I don't know what I'm going to do. I want to do everything. I was very lucky. We had a close family friend who worked at the United Nations. And I had a chat to him saying, I'm clueless. Everyone else seems to know exactly what they want to do. They know what degree they're going to take. They know what company they're going to work for over summer. And their lives are set. And he said, honestly, don't worry about it. You are so young. Your life will change in so many different ways over the decades that it's more important that you try everything and get a feel for what you like and what you don't like. Because there's nothing worse than being in a job that you're not passionate about, that you don't enjoy. So I went off to university because I didn't know what else to do and ended up taking everything. I did some psychology and some philosophy and some geography and biology and environmental science and tried to keep my degree as broad as possible. These days you guys have the great opportunity of doing these general education papers, which makes it a bit easier for you. Back in my day they were desperately trying to major me into bio or psychology, and I didn't really want to do any of that. Eventually I settled on geography, and that is basically my heartland, my discipline. That's where I come from. Towards the end of my degree I realised I still hadn't made up my mind what I wanted to do with my life. So I did a master's. And yes, it was in geography. The one thing that had happened during my time at university is I'd got summer jobs. I'd worked at Auckland City doing central planning. I had to be one of those poor students that dropped leaflets off at all the shops along Dominion Road because they were going to widen it and cut back all the shops. And the trick was to run and drop it off and run out again before they read it. I also worked at Auckland Regional Council, and there I was doing soil monitoring and seismic monitoring, so I was covering everything I could. But what it made me think about when I was working for all these local government organisations is about that consultation side of it. And so my master's actually ended up being on consultation, how local governments engage with your communities, the whole public participation side of it. So I was very much heading into that sort of human geography, social questioning type area. I came out of my master's degree and thought, okay, I need to get a job. And I applied for everything I could. I applied for jobs at the Ministry for Environment. I applied for research positions at universities. And I also applied for an assistant transport planning role at Auckland City Council. And I'd done nothing on transport to this point. I caught the bus because I had to use it. I thought a bit about the fact that Auckland was really suffering and that our roads were getting busier and busier and our city was not a happy place to live in. I am an Aucklander. I've been a Jaffa my whole life, and it was quite sad in the early 2000s to see how congested Auckland was getting and the slow change about public transport, but it really hadn't picked up much momentum at that point. So I got the job at Auckland City Council, and actually there's someone sitting in this very room who I met on my first day at Auckland City Council, and the first project that they threw me into was the real-time passenger information system. Those damn electronic signs. And 10 years later I'm still working on that project. See, so there's longevity in this. It was an eye-opener. It was actually really exciting because the commitment that the council made back in 2003 to putting these electronic signs on the street, it's an expensive project, was that there was clearly the shift going on where councils were starting to think about public transport in a different way. This is long before social media, before smartphones, before you could get everything on Street View and Google Maps. This was really revolutionary back in the early 2000s. And those signs were so exciting back then. It was an interesting project. It had its ups and downs, as it still does to this day. But we really learned so much. We learned so much about people's perceptions of public transport in Auckland. The fact that everyone was like, oh my goodness, you're actually starting to invest some money in this. That's brilliant. And it was a really challenging project with lots of problem solving. And that's a key theme you'll find in any transport project you work in, is the problem solving aspect. One of the things that got me thinking about was what these technologies were doing to how we sort of engage with the environments around us. And I was standing at one of these signs one day testing it to check it was working properly. And I realised that it said the bus was about 10 minutes away, and I thought, oh, I can go grab a coffee at the cafe. And then I thought, gosh, that's a change. In the past, I'd be glued to the side of the road, staring down at willing the bus to turn up, too terrified to step away for even a second just in case it went sailing past without me. It made me think, wow, these technologies are sort of changing our experiences. And the more I thought about that, the more I thought about, do I want to be working at council? Do I want to be working in transport, or am I interested in wider things? So my career went, and I went off and did a PhD. I came back to university here, in fact, to do it, and it was because of the real-time system. It was because all these exciting things were happening with all these technologies, and I wanted to know more about it. And the wonderful thing about a PhD is that it means you can look really detailed and in-depth for a very long time about a specific topic. And it teaches you a whole range of skills about yourself, mostly about your willpower, about where your strengths and weaknesses are, about hanging in there until you finish the damn thing. But I'm not saying you need to do a master's or a PhD to work in public transport, but I'm just sort of giving you an indication of you can go sideways a lot and still end up back in the same place, because when I finished my PhD, I came right back to working in transport in Auckland, and I'm working at T2 Engineers. The theme, of course, is that real-time system that has weaved itself through my life, and I'm still trying to help Auckland Transport get it right. The thing about working in this industry, as Josh said and as I said before, is the variety of things that you do. One day I can be going into Auckland Transport to get a briefing on, we want to move these bus stops and put in this bus lane and get that sort of information. The next day I'll be out on site, we'll be trying to measure it up and see what's going on. The next day I'll be trying to explain to Mrs. Smith in 4A why the bus stop needs to go outside her house. And then we've got all sorts of other things that come out of that. It's interesting working for an engineering firm. I'm a geographer and I work with a bunch of engineers. And we always joke about the fact that I'm their translator. And they always joke about the fact that they're converting me to the dark side. But we need all these skill sets in public transport. We need engineers, we need planners and geographers, we need psychologists. It honestly doesn't matter what your background is, it's more about what you're passionate about. And that was what Josh was saying and what you'll hear throughout what we're saying tonight. I wanted to, in a very cliche way, I feel like what I'm doing now is actually physically making a difference. My PhD was great, I got to look at something in detail and became very theoretical and abstract towards the end. And then I came out of it going, that was an interesting experience, I learned a lot about myself, but I want to do something practical. I want to do something that actually means I see changes on the street. And there's nothing more satisfying for me than going out onto the street after a bus stop's been put in or after an intersection's been changed and looking at it and going, I helped do that. It's a really nice feeling. This is a very challenging area to work in and it has its ups and downs. It's definitely not a sprint. Transport's a marathon. You have to be in it for the long haul. But you get little wins along the way that keep encouraging you to come back and try again and push a bit further and convince another person to get out of their car and get on the bus. If there's one message I'd like to leave you with, it's that, it really doesn't matter what you do, it's what you're passionate about. You can come from a whole range of backgrounds into the public transport discipline. It's not about specific papers or specific degrees. The more variety we get, the better we can communicate to a wider audience. So next time you're standing at the bus stop wondering what that sign's doing, maybe the next thought should be, maybe I should get a job in there to do something about it.
Yeah.